The operations room fell silent the moment the number appeared on the screen. At first, no one spoke. The digital report glowed against the dim walls of the briefing hall, casting pale light across their faces. Commander Daniel Hayes leaned closer to the table, his jaw tightening slightly as his eyes locked onto the distance. Then he whispered the question that made the room uneasy: who made that kill? Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Outside the base, dawn was still hours away. A cold wind pressed against the windows, rattling them faintly. Inside, a group of elite SEAL operators stood around the briefing table studying the mission report from the night before. The mission itself had been brutal. A reconnaissance team had been trapped on a rocky hillside after stumbling into hostile territory. Visibility was poor, communication had been patchy. For nearly an hour, the team had waited under cover, unsure of extraction. Then suddenly, the threat that had been stalking them simply dropped. One precise shot, one impossible distance. Hayes had read thousands of mission reports, but this one made his pulse slow because the distance listed beside the confirmed hit was almost unreal, over 2 kilometers. Someone in the room shifted uncomfortably. That can't be right, one operator murmured. Another leaned over the screen, squinting at the numbers. No sniper on our roster was positioned that far out. Hayes remained silent, his mind running through possibilities. A terrain map appeared beside the report, displaying hills, ravines, and jagged ridgelines stretching into the dark wilderness. If the shot came from that distance, there were only a handful of locations where it could have been taken. Most were nearly impossible to reach in time. Pull up the drone footage, Hayes finally said. The screen flickered and grainy aerial footage appeared. The hillside looked cold and empty now, the night wind brushing across dry grass and scattered rocks. The operators leaned forward. They all knew what they were looking for: a firing position, any sign of movement. Minutes passed in tense silence, then someone spotted it, a small shape near the top of a distant ridge, barely visible. Hayes narrowed his eyes. Zoom in. The image sharpened slowly, and when the figure became clear enough to recognize, Hayes felt the colored rain, because he knew exactly who it was. Sergeant Mara Quinn. Across the room, a few operators exchanged confused glances. Quinn wasn't the first name anyone expected. She was quiet, almost invisible during most operations, the kind of person who listened more than she spoke. But Hayes remembered something the others didn't. Years earlier, during a joint training exercise in the mountains, he had seen her fire once across a canyon most people wouldn't even attempt. The bullet had traveled farther than possible. Back then, people had called it luck. Now he wasn't so sure. Hayes stepped away from the table and stared at the frozen image of Quinn lying prone on the ridge. Wind whipped across the mountain top in the footage, tugging at her gear as she remained perfectly still. For a moment he imagined what she must have been thinking up there: the distance, the shifting air currents, the narrow margin between success and failure. One tiny miscalculation and the shot would have missed by meters. And below her, an entire team had been waiting for a miracle. One of the younger operators broke the silence. She took that shot alone. Hayes nodded slowly. Yes. Another man frowned. But that's insane. Hayes looked back at the screen. Or necessary, because the truth about moments like that wasn't about glory. Quinn hadn't taken the shot to prove anything. She had taken it because somewhere far below her, people were running out of time. And sometimes the line between impossible and necessary was only one decision wide. Later that morning, Quinn walked quietly into the operations room. She looked tired. Windburn traced faint red lines across her cheeks, and her eyes carried the distant look of someone who hadn't slept. The room grew still. Not out of fear, out of respect. Hayes stepped toward her, holding the report in his hand. Was the distance correct? He asked softly. Quinn glanced at the number on the page. Then she nodded once. That's what the range finder showed. No pride, no dramatic explanation, just a simple answer. And somehow that made the moment even heavier. Hayes studied her for a moment before placing the report on the table. You saved 6 lives last night. Quinn's gaze drifted briefly toward the window, where the first faint light of morning was beginning to touch the sky. I just did my job, she said quietly. But everyone in that room knew it had been far more than that, because true skill isn't measured by distance or records, it's measured by the courage to act when others cannot. And sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one capable of the most extraordinary things. Greatness rarely announces itself, it simply shows up when the moment demands it, like a single echo across a silent mountain. If this story stayed with you, tell me in the comments what you think it takes to make a decision like that. And don't forget to subscribe to Cinematic Whispers for more powerful stories that prove the quietest heroes often leave the deepest impact.